Welcome back. I'm Tedward, and today, thanks to Bond Group in Waltham, Massachusetts, we're answering the question, what if the E39 M5 was a two-door, two-seater, topless roadster? This is the iconic BMW Z8, or Z8 if you're of the European persuasion and want to get persnickety. It's powered by the S62, which is the naturally aspirated 4.94 liter dual overhead cam V8, tried and true M engine, and you shift it through its 6-speed manual gearbox, rear-wheel drive, of course, but the Z8 is also an homage to the BMW 507, probably the most iconic German roadster, I think. You can comment below if you can think of something else, but that is one of the most beautiful cars ever built. And oddly enough, the Z8 also posed as one of the greatest Bond cars of all time, because BMW worked their way into James Bond at one point, where they had the E38 7 Series and this E52 Z8. But first and foremost, this is one of the very few cars that managed to do a retro futuristic design in an appealing way. I don't think anybody doesn't like this car. I'm sure you can nitpick little things if you'd like, but I think the Z8 still to this day has a lot of provenance on the road and everybody takes a peek. So first, let me show you inside, because one of the greatest things about this car is its simplicity. The interior is sparse, but not unluxurious. These seats are fantastic, and everything about this car seemingly earned its price tag. When it was new, it was about $130,000 US, and that would have been quite a bit of money back in 2001. But if this were around today, I feel like it would just share a million parts with every other BMW. And yeah, of course there are shared parts, but it does seem that this gauge cluster, this HVAC system, hiding the radio in here, all these little things are sort of bespoke to the Z8. In fact, they even minimized how many buttons are on this door, because there's one window switch right here and it powers both right and left windows. But let's get it started. Even the key, although it looks just like my E39 M5 key, except it has this little guy here. If you flip it over, Z8, they don't want you to confuse this with your M5 key. Into this sort of center ignition style. We'll flip this over, illuminates our gauges, and then our engine start button is over here, so you don't just turn the key like every other BMW. So that makes this whole experience just a little bit more special. Now, they did have an Alpina version of this car that employed the M62, not quite the M-spec engine, but those were all mated to automatic gearboxes. And although those are beautiful cars, I've got to say, this is the one to have, in my opinion. The S62 is set as far back as possible. This car is much larger than I think people think. It's not a Z3. This is a pretty big vehicle. But despite its large engine bay, they did reorganize some things in comparison to the M5. For example, your oil filter is tucked away back over here. So there is some redistribution of items in the engine bay that are different than you would normally see in an E39. And when we jump into the trunk, I also want to illuminate the hazards, because this has a really special setup for its lighting, because the lights are neon, which makes them very expensive and cumbersome to replace when needed. But when we open this pretty massive depth for some storage, your battery is tucked away down there. And over here, these are all of our navigation DVDs. I believe this is the DVD system, right? Either way, there's a disc with all of the different layouts of the United States and Canada. So this is how we used to navigate back in the day, and if roads changed like they did in Boston with the Big Dig, you'd have to get a new DVD to load the software into these cars, and it was not cheap. It was actually incredibly expensive. And with these hazards on, you can start to get a feel for how they did these side markers and the front. So everything on the car definitely has a very distinct style, which I really appreciate, because they didn't just slap some fancy body on something that already existed. This car really is its own thing. And gluing us to the road up front on an 18-inch wheel is a 245 section tire, and in the rear a 275 section tire, just like we would have seen on the E39 M5. So let's get our plate on it and we'll take it for a drive. There's actually one more hidden luxury in here, the Motorola StarTAC from the factory. Always cool to see. Doubt that works. You'd have to do some trickery to make that operate today. Rolling off the clutch. I've got to say, it feels just like an E39 M5. You get the same rumble, the same vibe, and that's a good thing. E39 M5 is a great car, and to kind of translate that DNA into this is really impressive. But just because it's bigger than the Z3 and has a big V8 up front, it still has a 50-50 weight distribution, and it does handle. In fact, this was out-handling the Ferrari 360, according to some magazines, in period, which I gotta say, that's pretty impressive to hear. Look at that. They both go up at the same time when you've got that in the center. I think that is so cool. This car has so many weird little tricks up its sleeves. It's a claimed 4.7 to 60. This thing is quick. It feels faster than that. I don't know, maybe that number's not right. This actually does feel really quick. Oh my goodness. The best thing about it though is it's compliant. You can hit some bumps, you can use it. Look at that. I mean, there's so many sports cars today that just stake their sportiness on their stiffness. And it's just not good. I feel like roads have gotten worse. Maybe that's me just getting old and complaining, but it does seem that way. And this, it just seems to absorb everything. It doesn't dive and squat and roll quite as much as an E39, but then again, my E39 needs a suspension refresh, so this is pretty fresh. It's only got 13,970 miles on it, so this hasn't been through the 80 or 90,000 that my car's been through. But it does feel really good to drive what feels like essentially a brand new S62. Oh my goodness, what a car. Big honking nose on this thing, just like me. E46 M3 with the top up and no thumbs up. I mean, of anyone in the world who should be waving to us, it was that driver. All right, let's see what we can do for this cabin. I've got a bit of wind noise in here. That is one thing when you've designed a car to be an homage to an old sports car. Aerodynamically inside, maybe not the most important thing. It's not wind buffeting, it's just windy, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a windy interior. It's not great for audio, but we'll make do. Having these offset to the middle is totally fine by me, no problems there. The only issue I think in this cabin, ergonomically, is that the painted surfaces reflect a lot of light. So today it's a cloudy day, it's not super terrible, but I do see a lot of just shapes moving. So if you're seeing shapes moving right in front of me on that dashboard, I'm also seeing that. And you learn and train your eye not to acknowledge it, but it's a little distracting right off the bat. It's a sacrifice I'm happy to make for style. When we turn our headlights on, these illuminate beautifully in red. So every car should be red. Anything other than red is incorrect. Everything about this car just feels proper, tight. And all the control surface, everything you touch, I mean, for a car that's kind of like a little one-off, you know, they only made 5,703 of these. You'd almost expect to have to sacrifice some things for it, but you just don't. Everything that's like special to the car feels really good and like mass-produced in the best possible way. It's not a drag strip gearbox, okay? This is not a Camaro SS1LE. These cars, E39s, E46s, and these are not the cars you're just ripping 1.2s as hard as you possibly can. They don't love it. You can, but for how long? That's really the question. It's not that they're fragile. It's a great gearbox. It's just that they're kind of designed more for a road course setup than a drag strip setup. So you do have to be a little ginger with it in those applications. But it's such a responsive engine, despite having some serious displacement, especially for a BMW. And I know a lot of you out there, keyboard warriors typing away, that you'd hit that corner so much harder, and like, you absolutely could. But we are in somewhat of a neighborhood, and people walk their dogs here. I'm not trying to hit someone's golden retriever. I know you hate people, but I'm telling you, if you hit a dog, you'd be pretty upset. Look how, oh dude, this car is just such a I can't believe anyone doesn't have hundreds of thousands of miles on these cars. These are so good to just get in and use. Go over some bumps, and it's like rock solid. This is the best of the best. You're talking about, to me, the best days of BMW's modern era, and you're driving a car that they cared so much about. It's got a really distinct style, but honestly, it's just built well, and that's really special. This is just so perfect. And I'm sure there's those of you who are like, why aren't you in sport mode? Well, sport mode doesn't do a lot in these cars. It changes the throttle map, so it's a little more sensitive, but the standard map on this throttle is fantastic. And if it's like the E39 M5, it'll stiffen up the steering box a little bit. But I think the steering weight on this is just fine. Look at this. We're going to go over these bumps, these deathly bumps. Not only do we have ground clearance, we have compliance, and nothing's rattling in it. It's perfect. apologize for the wind noise out here on the highway. It's just part of being in a convertible, but the best thing about this engine, this S62, is that it's kind of overkill for this car. And just like in the E39 M5, you can just ride the torque anywhere and everywhere you want. 6th gear on the highway, you'll never really need a downshift unless you're trying to go for some really aggressive pass. And on a back road, 4th gear will carry you pretty much everywhere. Z8 feels like one of those rare projects where everything worked out, where the design met its goal. It clearly represents the heritage of the 507. The powertrain available at the time was one of the best BMW ever made. The S62 stood the test of time through the E39 M5, but also through racing. People used those for years and years. These are just really robust, phenomenal engines. They've got grunty low down torque, and they still rev out high enough to make big enough power. This car is just the culmination of a lot of great things happening at once. And BMW today, maybe they're starting to get back on track a little bit, but maybe not. I mean, it's really difficult to see what direction they're going sometimes. And for those of us who are like the purist M people, I really was disappointed when they just kind of started using the M badge as a marketing technique. And it's really neat that this Z8 doesn't have M badges on it. It has an M engine, but it's not trying to say, look at me, let's put a bunch of M colors and M badges and things. It is its own thing, and I think that's really great and wholesome. Yes, it's still worth quite a bit of money, but I genuinely think for what you're getting a really stylish, somewhat rare package with a serviceable powertrain. And isn't that what you want? To have one of these cars that you can actually drive around, enjoy. You're not going to get frustrated because it's not poorly built by somebody who just wanted it to look pretty. And parts readily available. Any indie BMW shop can work on this. And they'll be thrilled to work on this because they'll be thrilled to get a Z8 in the shop and show it off to everybody on their Instagram or whatever. So anyway, I am going to go bring this thing back to Bond Group. I'm really glad I got another go in it. It's better this time, honestly. Like, I already liked this car, but time is proving that this car is even better than I remembered. So thank you guys so much for coming on this great drive with the BMW Z8. Thanks to Bond Group for tossing the key. Thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one.